Hello and welcome to the Hard Sell, where the stick in the swill-bucket rattles back, and to another Happiness in Magazines instalment. This is where I find an old magazine on the internet and go through the adverts. Very simple premise, but then I'm Cornish and we're a simple folk. So far this strand's looked at Sunday supplements, the testosterone-scented Esquire, and TV listings magazines from both sides of the Atlantic. For today, I decided to tackle one of the really big ones. Time magazine. The fortnightly big bollocks news attack from America. There are overseas versions for Europe, incorporating the Middle East and Africa, Asia, the South Pacific and Mars as well, but they all take their cues from America like everyone else in the entire world who knows what's good for them. So when should we choose? Well, bearing in mind I can't exactly choose freely from the whole century-plus history here, I'm restricted to what people happen to have found, scanned and uploaded. Let's go for something nice and quiet in the mid-90s. Relatively speaking. That decade between the end of the Cold War era and the start of the era of collapse, which increasingly feels like history itself taking a long, deep, shuddering breath. So let's pick a random issue from 1995. April 24th. Let's go. An uplifting cover, I trust you'll agree, but one that illustrates the point I just made. It's an image of past horrors from the era we just left, the Cold War. Not that nothing terrible happened in 1995, or even just in April. The first cover that month is of a smug-looking Shoko Asahara, who just slaughtered over a dozen people and crippled thousands more with sarin gas on the Tokyo Underground. Actually, it was a shit of a year for Japan in general. And the very next cover has a massive picture of Timothy McVeigh on the cover, apparently staring impassively at a tiny child he just murdered with a bomb in Oklahoma City. But this sort of horror was the exception, rather than, as it feels now, the rule. You turn on the news today and there are at least 3 different stories that could end in Armageddon, at least one of which very probably will. Going through Time magazine in 1995, there's things like the Oklahoma bombing and the Kobe earthquake, but it's mostly about the upcoming presidential election, or the trial of O.J. Simpson, or just celebrity puff pieces. To be fair, Time's been this way for decades and still is now, it's just the surrounding context that's different. Still, never mind the sweeping generalisations. This April the 24th issue, with the front cover marking 20 years since the fall of Saigon, coinciding with Robert McNamara finally conceding that the whole Vietnam War was never any of America's business in the first place, and that by plunging in as if it was, they basically ruined everything forever. Talking of ruining everything forever, Honda just invented the SUV. Or so they seem to think. Basically, they slapped some regular doors on the sides of a minivan instead of one big slidey one, and oops, that's an SUV. The Honda of minivans. Was there really some inherent prestige about the Honda name in 1995?
Jumping Caesar's catfish! My H has been stolen! Oh, that's how people know it's a Honda! What's the point of having a Honda if you can't show it off?
Was that not a joke? Oh well. They're sort of half-heartedly using the aesthetic of Keith Haring here, the New York pop artist who died in 1990 just as he was becoming iconic. Quite why they're using Haring's imagery I don't know, since it amounts to a couple of icons, an illustration of the product that presumably someone else has done in his style since he's dead and all, and a bit of bespoke lettering, completely devoid of context, and none of it displaying even a tenth of the energy of the real man's works. Maybe I'm missing some context. They do at least give him credit, in the finest of print. Over the page, some guy in khakis for the Gap. In black and white, of course, for classiness, and also simple high contrast. Everything is black except your man's face and his trousers, so they stand out nicely, albeit blending in with the background a bit. I'm not sure how this constitutes his or anyone's best work, though. Standing precariously on an office chair in snowshoes seems more like tempting fate to break at least one of your limbs to me. Interesting guy, though, this Perry Kleban. He did indeed found the Atlas Snowshoes Company, which is the market leader to this day, but he sold it at the turn of the century and went on to run a whole bunch of other clothing companies, before packing it in altogether and becoming a business teacher. He's now a professor at Stanford. I'd like to think there's a framed poster of this advert in his office. Over the page again, there's more aspirational clothing, well, accessories, in the shape of the good old Swiss watch. You might think that's what the name Swatch means, Swiss watch, especially with the Swiss flag right there in the logo. But no, actually, in fact. Ironically, the name actually originated as a contraction of second watch. You see, in the 70s, lightweight battery-powered quartz watches, digital and otherwise, became a thing in the mass market. The Swiss wouldn't have it in the house, of course, sticking with traditional heavy mechanical clockwork contraptions, which are almost as eye-wateringly expensive to buy as they were to manufacture. This inevitably almost killed one of the oldest industries in Europe, until the two biggest remaining groups agreed to swallow their pride, merge, embrace quartz, and start churning out cheap plastic watches from an assembly line that would need replacing after about 1,000 ticks. It worked, and Switzerland was back on the watchmaking map. All of which has nothing much to do with this, which is speed skater Dan Jansen, who a year earlier won Olympic gold at Lillehammer after 10 years of trying and in his very last ever race by 23,000th of a second. So as you can imagine, he has a fraught relationship with the abstract concept of time. This is all vaguely to do with the forthcoming Summer Olympics in Atlanta, for which Swatch was the official timekeeper. Then there's this strangely generic drug advert. This is one of those things they do in America which we don't, about which we're right and they're wrong. Specifically, you can't advertise drugs in this country unless they're available over the counter. Prescription drugs cannot be advertised, because they ain't sold. Not to the public, anyway. Seems strangely obvious when you lay it out like that, but no, in America they can nudge you in the ribs for something like Zantac here. Sounds more like the name of an arcade game from the 80s, incidentally. For the treatment of acid reflux disease, by saying, ask your doctor about it. Go on, bother your GP until he writes you a prescription for this stuff. Or whatever the term for GP is in America. I mean, really, the whole idea is meant to be that you trust your GP to know what, if anything, to prescribe based on your symptoms and not some ad copy. Speaking of which, like I said, this advert is vaguely unsettling in its genericness. Just a stock library photo of a couple in their 50s, or maybe 60s, having a picnic on a little pier, I guess, amidst boilerplate copy and an entirely tautological slogan. The slogan in particular feels like the whole advert has just thrown up its arms and walked away. Only Zantac is Zantac. Well, we're not lying. Skipping ahead a few pages, look everyone, it's Christy Yamaguchi. Not sure what all this winter sports material is in aid of, it's April 1995. The last Winter Olympics were over a year ago. But here she is anyway in that extremely long-running campaign for milk, where famous people pose with milk moustaches above some pun-laden copy. They kept that up until 2014. In fact, as this demonstrates, it actually predates the Got Milk slogan, or its nationwide adoption anyway. It was invented by the California Milk Board in 1993. By the end of 1995, the national campaign with the moustaches was using it too. Unlike the moustaches, the phrase is actually still around as a sort of freelance slogan, which is very American. A few more pages later, a bit of graffiti pop art, so you don't forget it's 1995. Another Japanese car, this time Nissan, altogether more confrontational than Honda. They'd gone for friendly, quasi-juvenile minimalism with the Keith Haring theme, underdeveloped though it was. Nissan are still in a pop art mood, but they're using it to illustrate how their car will beat the shit out of you. The copy is equally muscular. Walloping 140 horsepower engine. Amazing suspension that allows you to slalom faster than a Ferrari. Because obviously you need that to drive through Newark at rush hour. Room for 4 long-legged adults. Because they wanted to force some kind of association with supermodels, whether it made sense or not. Fuller Road? It's more like a knuckle sandwich. Just looks like a car to me, above and beyond my general ignorance of the damn things. I know what a sports car looks like, and I know what a two-door coupe looks like. Call it the 200SX all you like, that's a truncated Nissan Sunny, and you know it. The next advert isn't until the middle pages, and guess what? It's another car. Well, actually a pickup. From Ford, in the midst of their Ford Tough campaign and slogan. I'm mentioning that because the advert is, well, bollocks. There once was a guy named Clyde, who was searching for a cool new ride. One day his hopes soared when he drove the Ranger from Ford and discovered it's hot new inside. Really now? I know 1995 was a funny old period in American style, with grunge slowly dying and no one quite sure what the next wave would be, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't Gilbert Gottfried in Ray-Bans taking a shit on the ground. Or limericks without punchlines, for that matter. Next. Oh god, so many cars. Chrysler here, going for the sophisticated connoisseurs end of the market, exulting in the Concorde's design, using upper-class imagery like a walk around the grounds, and words like windsheeting and spectrum, serif fonts, and an artisanal slogan reading "Form follows function," clearly trying to compete with the classy low-end luxury likes of Audi and BMW. Still just a saloon, though. Elephant! With a broken leg, what a shame. But it's okay, he's got a bandage made of heavy-duty tape from 3M, so he's doing okay. In fact, he looks downright bored. Also, there's a kid who's skinned his knees, and they've provided his plaster as well. This advert is cleverer than it looks, because it looks like, and functions as, an advert for the kiddie sticky plaster. But it's not. Even though it offers free samples of the things, it's not. No. Because then it would end with a pack shot or something, instead of the logo and slogan of the conglomerate making it. 3M. You remember the guys who make Scotch tape. It's an advert for the Dow Jones. Buy shares in us while the proles buy our products. It gets both goals sorted out at once without letting on that it's doing either. Like I said, clever. Next, another sodding car. Was there nothing else to buy in 1995? Well, for Time magazine's demographic, apparently not. These are apparently people who have everything, so why not get another car? You might as well. Anyway, this one's particularly irritating. Take a look. Well, I feel attacked. I think you're confusing us with Wisconsinites. Yes, the second-generation Range Rover just made it to America in time for the SUV explosion. Popularity explosion, I mean. Interesting that they're selling it on Britishness, as if that's particularly impressive in the first place, because the disintegrating British car industry was almost non-existent by now, and these cars in particular were being made by BMW. Then in 2000, Ford of all people. And now the Indian Tata Motors, who have just announced that they will at least start manufacturing them in this country again. So that's something. Next, another prescription drug. With the coming of spring, hay fever season has arrived, as has the problem that most antihistamines make you dopey, as illustrated here. Hisminol is one that doesn't, apparently, although it's not loratadine, the leading non-drowsy hay fever pill. Ask me how I know. The problem with these prescription drug ads, or one of them, is that they have to fill the majority of the copy with disclaimers and warnings, and then literally print the entire information leaflet over leaf just to be on the safe side. Hardly seems worth it. Hisminol, in fact, is all because of a small but actual chance it may actually kill you. In fact, so was Zantac, fairly recently, on account of apparently it gives you cancer. I'm not going to risk my eyesight checking, but I'm prepared to bet that in neither case is this mentioned in the leaflet. Skipping forward to the back pages, there are other adverts, but quite frankly, if you can find something funny about this one, you can keep it to yourself. We end on yet more autoeroticism. First is this rather messy advert for Goodyear Tires. Brash colours, mixed fonts, no obvious sense of direction in the design. Look at the slogan. Look at how it's formatted. They need to spend less on blimps and more on hiring a competent ad man. More evidence that the SUV explosion is well underway, though, with these tyres having been specifically made for the bastard things. And still more evidence over Leaf, with this Toyota shuttlecraft-looking thing. Technically, again, this is actually so big it's a minivan, but the line is visibly blurring. Unusually, this advert's more about cash money than how great the car, or rather the van, is. You might could lease it instead of owning one. Only $300 a month. Only. 8 market crashes and at least 2 major recessions later, this is almost incomprehensible. You could get the impression that the people of 1995 just shat banknotes. In this country at the time, Toyota was the car in front. In America, however, they were still using the creepy stalker slogan, "I love what you do for me," which suggests an unhealthy relationship on the part of the car, the driver, the company, or all three. You do you, I guess. These days it would just be called a pan-polycule. Not sure it would sell more cars, though. And that's the end of the magazine. So what, if anything, have we learned? Well, there were a whole lot of cars for sale in 1995, and most of them were unnecessarily massive, to the point of actually being vans or trucks, which is something we're paying for now. The first wave of mainstream environmentalism, CFCs and the ozone hole from the late 80s and early 90s, had clearly died down by now. In fact, there's an article about that in this issue. Also, winter sports were apparently popular for some reason, what with 2 skaters and the CEO of a snowshoe company having their own ads. Oh, and acid reflux disease was apparently rife among the over 50s. At least we had Britpop to distract ourselves. You just sat through a Bob the Fish production. Nice! If you haven't already, you absolutely must check out bobthefish.org.uk. Literally hundreds more videos not unlike that one, adding up to days worth of entertainment and all absolutely free. But if you're not a cold-hearted skinflint, you can always support us on Patreon. For as little as anything at all, you can make programs like the one you just watched possible in the first place, and become eligible for bonus material such as glimpses of the book I'm writing about the BBC, monthly riffings on random commercial breaks, the complete archives of the angry political satire magazine Two Sons, and even the odd very occasional bonus video essay unavailable anywhere else. If nothing else, you should prevent me from starving and or freezing to death in the foreseeable future, so that'll be nice. No pressure or anything. Well, UK, you make it what it is.